this video, I'm going to show you how to get a node by its index in a doubly linked list. Alright, so for this method, I'm going to call it get. Alright, get will get past an index as an argument. That index is necessary for locating the specific location within the list that we want to pull or get the specific node from. All right, so going to our pseudocode, the first thing we're going to do is to check, is the index out of bounds? All right, so this first check is if the index is less than 0, in other words, is it a negative number, or if it's greater than or equal to this dot length, then return undefined. Next, we're going to check if the index is 0. So if the index is equal to 0, then that means, well, we just return the head, right? Because it's the very first node that we're seeking. So return this dot head. All right, the next one is check, is the index for the end of the list? So in other words, is the index past the same as the length of the list minus 1, which would refer to the tail of the list. So if index is equal to this dot length minus 1, because remember the index we start at 0, so for that reason we have to add the negative 1. So if that is the case, then we're just going to return the tail. And that is it for our edge cases. So the next thing is we're going to set the current node and counter variables. Okay, these are two things we're going to need to keep track of. All right, so the first one is the current node, and we're going to start that at the head or at the beginning of the list. And then we're also going to have a counter, because we're going to be using a while loop, and we're going to set by initially to 0. All right, so as we're making each iteration of the while loop, we're going to increment one by 1. All right, but we need to keep track with that counter. All right, so now let's go ahead here. So set current node and counter variables. We took care of that. So now loop while the argument index is not equal to the counter. Okay, so while the argument index, referring to this here, is not equal to the counter, all right, and initially it's at 0, then we're gonna enter this block, this loop, and we're gonna update these two values here. All right, so for the current node, we're gonna advance the pointer forward 1 position or to the right, and for the counter we're going to increment it by 1. So the first loop will pass, and then the counter is going to be 1, second loop, and then 2, and continue on just like that. All right, so let's go ahead with the current node. So if we enter here the first time, we're going to update it to be current node dot next, and for the counter plus plus. All right, so at some point, this is going to keep looping until eventually whatever the index was provided. So say the index was at 3 here, that was passed as 3. So once there's a total of 3 loops, or this counter ends up being 3, then this loop will not execute, and we would stop the loop and then start executing the code afterwards. But once that the end of the loop reaches, at that point, that means that we have reached the location within our list. So let's say, for example, let me go ahead and add another value to this list here. So I'm going to push, let me go ahead and push 75. All right. So by doing this here, I'm essentially end up with this list now like this. Okay, so now we have 4 nodes inside our list. So let's see here. So say we are trying to we place an index here as a value. Say this is okay, so there's 0, 1, and 2. So 24 is as index 2. Let's say that if I was to do like list.get and I pass the index of 2, then it's going to keep looping. So it's going to start here, the loop will start here, and then it's going to move on here. Oh, there we go. Then it's going to move on to the second node. Okay, and this is 1, so it's still not there. And then it's going to move here, which is indexed at 2. At this point, the while loop is gonna the while loop is gonna exit, because we arrived to the index in which we entered here. In this case is value 2, and this is 2. This is at index 2, so it would stop over here. And at the same time, the current node will have the 24, and it would have, the current node would be this node here once we exit this while loop. So at that point, all we have to do is return the current node, and that will be it. All right, so I could show you right now that is the case. So here again, I'm pushing in 4 values, it creates this, and I'm getting the index at 2. So at 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. So it would grab the 24 for me. So let's go ahead and test that out. Run the code, and you see here it gives me the node with the 24. All right, so there you go. We got a get method that if we pass in the index, it will locate the specific node within our list based off that index.